Do you want this? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Cicely Horsham-Brathwaite, and on behalf of the Mental Health Committee of the Eastern Area, the Links Incorporated, I have the pleasure of serving as your moderator. Please join me in welcoming the phenomenal women responsible for what I know will be a wonderful event. Eastern Area Director, the Links Incorporated, Dr. Shawana Tucker Sims. Eastern Regional Director of Jack and Jill of America Incorporated, Melinda Alexis Hayes, Esquire. I am the Eastern Area Mental Health Chair, Dr. Cicely Horsham-Brathwaite. Eastern Area Program Chair, Ms. Rhonda Crowder. Eastern Area Health and Human Services Chair, Ms. Siobhan Arline Bradley. Eastern Area Health and Human Services Co-Chair, Dr. Jill Bussey Harris. Eastern Area Mental Health Committee members, Pia Alexander Harris, Nikki Farrier, Dr. Leslie Hayes, Ms. Rhonda Turner, and Dr. Gretchen Vaughn. To our national officers, appointed and executive council members present, and our esteemed presenters, Dr. Elizabeth Wade Mahoney, child and adolescent psychiatrist, member of the Links Incorporated, Dr. Alexandra McGloshin, school clinical psychologist, member of Jack and Jill of America Incorporated, Dr. Sharon Kirkland Gordon, psychologist, at Buffalo Counseling Services. Ms. Crystal Davis is wearing a dual hat this evening. She is an elementary school principal and also serves the Eastern Area of the Links Incorporated as the Services to Youth Chair and member of Jack and Jill of America Incorporated. Dr. Linda Anderson, psychologist, professor at Hostos Community College, City University of New York, and associate member of Jack and Jill of America Incorporated. To all members of the Links Incorporated, all members of Jack and Jill of America Incorporated, and to our esteemed guests. I now invite Dr. Shawana Tucker Sims, Eastern Area Director, the Links Incorporated, to bring greetings and share the purpose of tonight's webinar. Dr. Tucker Sims.
Good evening, and thank you for that introduction, Link Cecily. And thanks to each of you for joining us this evening for our session, Parent-Child Connections, Thriving During the COVID-19 Pandemic. I'm very pleased to partner with my sister friend, Melinda Hayes, the Eastern Region Director of Jack and Jill of America Incorporated. I am a life member of Jack and Jill, and as a result, have great appreciation for the role Jack and Jill plays in the development of our youth. Since the pandemic began, the Eastern Area of Links has turned its focus to virtual programming while physical distancing. One component of that is providing resources to our members online that cover a variety of topics to inform and assist them in coping with issues they are currently facing. As a wife, mother, and professional, it is very difficult to balance everything we must do in this current environment. While my son is a college student, there is still a level of coping with the new normal that children of all ages must do to adjust to a different style of academic instruction, social interaction of peers, and a new rhythm of life in a general environment of uncertainty. Tonight's Green Table Talk provides an opportunity for you to hear from leading experts in the field on the topic of parent-child connections and provide us all with needed resources and suggestions. We thank them for joining us this evening, and we're looking forward to their insights. Finally, on behalf of the Eastern Area Leadership Team and our over 4,500 members in the Eastern Area, I wish to commend the Mental Health Committee for this timely discussion. Thanks for listening and learning with us this evening.
Thank you. It is now my pleasure to welcome Melinda Alexis Hayes, Esquire, Eastern Regional Director, Jack and Jill of America, Incorporated, to bring greetings.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I wanted to first off begin by thanking the Link's Eastern Area Director, Dr. Shawana Tucker-Sims, for inviting Jack and Jill of America Incorporated Eastern Region to be a part of tonight's session. It's so important that we partner together, especially in times like this. It can feel often that we are alone, but we are not. It's beautiful to know that we can have a platform in which we can come together in uncharted times. We are all used to having a lot on our plate, being mothers, being entrepreneurs, and working and supporting our children. But now we have to take a primary role in making sure that those homework assignments are done, making sure that our children attend their Zoom meetings, that they get on Google Classrooms, that they get into Google Meets. We're used to having an administrative assistant. Sometimes we're not used to being the administrative assistant, but that's the platform that we're in now. We're also dealing with our children who want to be with their friends, not virtually and in person. We're also dealing with our children who are graduates, whether it's from elementary school, middle school, like my daughter, high school or college, who want to celebrate their work and their accomplishments, but have to do so in a new platform. We're also supporting our children, like my daughter, who's now an 11th grader, working on her personal statement, going on virtual college tours. There's a lot on our plate, even in these times. So it's a beautiful opportunity to come together as leaders in our families to learn and grow together on how to move forward in these unprecedented times. So thank you again for joining us tonight, and thank you for thinking of Jack and Jill of America Incorporated to be a part of tonight's session. Before I close out, I just want to share that I am a member of both the Brooklyn chapters of Links and Jack and Jill of America. So again, it's a beautiful partnership and it's near and dear to my heart. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Director Tucker-Sims and Madam Director Alexis Hayes. As we were planning tonight's webinar as a committee, one of the things that we very much found important to discuss during this time is that as our children are home more than we are used to being home, we are seeing them in different ways, in a different light than we may have ever expected. The persons who are here tonight speaking with you also get to see your children in a different light and a different way. And so you're getting a bird's eye view this evening of what happens in the classroom, in the therapy room, and I promise you, you'll get some insights that you wouldn't typically get. And so I invite you, as we get to the time when there'll be questions and answers, to place your questions in the chat, and we'll get to as many of them as we can, just so that you have an overview of how we will spend our time today. We'll first hear from 3 panelists. We'll pause for a brief Q&A midway and resume with 2 more panelists. You'll note that we have quite a group of accomplished women with many accolades. I will share highlights from their bios, and as we move to the Q&A, you'll get to hear more of their excellence. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. McGloshin. Dr. Alexandra McGloshin is a New York State licensed psychologist and certified bilingual school psychologist who speaks French and Haitian Creole. She holds a doctoral degree in school clinical child psychology, and she has worked for over 15 years as a school psychologist in both New York City and Long Island. And she is currently the high school psychologist for the Westbury, New York School District. She works directly with students to help improve learning, behavior, and emotional health. Previously, she was chairperson for the Committee on Preschool Special Education for the Roosevelt Public School District, and she is a member of the Association of Black Psychologists, Long Island School Practitioners Network, New York State Psychological Association, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and Jack and Jill of America. Dr. McGlashan has a private practice in Queens, and she consults and conducts psychoeducational evaluations for children and adults. She prides herself on delivering competent professional service with a warm and caring touch. Dr. McGlashan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Horsham-Brathwaite. Thank you to the Links Incorporated and to Jack and Jill of America Incorporated for inviting me to speak this evening. As if parenting weren't hard enough, enter COVID-19. I think it's important to first say that as parents, and I'm the parent of a preteen and a teen, we are in uncharted territory. Please try to practice loving kindness first and foremost to yourself, and next, practice loving kindness to your children. The truth is, the situation we find ourselves in it's painful, it's heartbreaking, and it's just plain tough. I like to always start with a reminder that we as people of color must always seek to protect our children's right to be children. There are good historical reasons why we're sometimes tempted to push our children into growing up too quickly. There is also evidence that society at large does this as well. However, we do a disservice to our children when we don't give them the opportunity to experience joy and to experience the privilege of childhood. So with that in mind, please be mindful of overexposure to the news and to adult conversations about COVID. The impact of the COVID-19 stay-at-home order on children will likely vary based on each individual child's unique needs. The best way to begin to assess your child's functioning is simply to ask them how they're doing. One way to do this is to have family meetings, weekly family meetings, and that way you'll be able to check in with your child and get a sense of how they're feeling and how they're doing. Note that your child may express feelings of sadness or even anger from missing school, missing organized activities and sports, and missing important milestones. They may express feelings of worry that they or you or someone they love may become sick or may pass away. Give them answers to their questions based on their age and or their developmental ability, and make sure that they know that they can talk to you about their feelings. Research on situations of prolonged stress on children tell us that children benefit from maintaining a sense of control through structure and routines. It's best to keep schedules similar to the school day, but be mindful not to overdo it. You really can't mimic the entire instructional school day in a remote learning situation and may end up harming your child if, for example, they're sitting in front of a screen for hours on end. Schedule family activities like bike riding, movie night, game night. For younger kids, give them a sense of control by doing things like maybe picking out 2 outfits and allowing them to choose what they'll wear. Make a picture schedule and include opportunities to pick activities when possible. These are the sort of things that happen during the school day. Allow time for daily unstructured creative play. And try to avoid harsh punishment. We are all very stressed out, but try to deal with behaviors such as tantrums by gently redirecting the child. For older kids, ask them to create their own schedule, which includes time to learn and time for recreation. But let them know that you'll review that schedule. And encourage them to participate in meaningful activities, such as maybe checking in on elderly neighbors or elderly relatives. Be willing to be flexible with your teens. Remember that the normal developmental task of adolescence is identity development and making time for peers and spending time with peers, not being quarantined with your family and siblings. Allow free time and use strategies such as humor to deal with cranky teen. But nevertheless, set limits. I think all parents of teens will agree that the unchecked teen will stay up all night and sleep all day. Finally, remember the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. And I want to remind you that social distancing has not changed that. Don't be afraid to reach out to a trusted member of your child's school to ask for help. Schools are often underutilized in regards to resources to support families. This is especially true if your child is having significant difficulty adjusting to remote learning, if your child is a student with a disability, or if your child is demonstrating worrisome behavioral or emotional symptoms. School counselors can help with referrals for clinical support and can give you strategies and guidance that you might be able to try at home. So, stay connected with your child and with your child's village. We really are in this all together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McGlashan. And now I'm pleased to introduce Ms. Crystal Davis. Principal Crystal Davis has 20 years experience as an educator. She has served in various roles: classroom teacher, instructional coach, assistant principal, and principal. In fact, she's been a principal in the East Orange, New Jersey public schools for the past 10 years. She has received numerous awards and recognition for her leadership in education, including Teacher of the Year and the esteemed Shirley Chisholm Award in Early Childhood Education from New Jersey Lieutenant Governor Sheila Y. Oliver. She's an active member of the New Jersey Principals and Supervisors Association, where she was appointed to serve on a special committee. Crystal currently serves as the Services to Youth Chair for the Eastern Area, the Links Incorporated. Ms. Davis.
Thank you so much, Link Cecily, and greetings to my Eastern Area Link sisters and my Eastern Region Jack and Jill mothers. Thank you so much for having me this evening. As you know, remote learning has created challenges in our educational system. It has also highlighted the inequality in education. With that being said, it is important for us to close the digital divide. And for me, it was critical amongst my students. And I did that by providing them with Chromebooks and soliciting complimentary internet service from various providers in Northern New Jersey. After the first week of the COVID shutdown, it became evident that we had to assist our families with creating structures and routines in their home. I posted a comment in my parent Google Classroom asking for parents, hey, how's it going? I hope all is well. And I received feedback, and it wasn't so positive. Many of them stated how chaotic and unproductive their home environment was. I was very troubled by that because I knew that my students wouldn't be engaged in the learning process, which is not an option. I expect 100% of my students to be active learners. As a result, we created a schedule framework of what the day should look like. There should be a set time for children to wake up, get dressed, have their breakfast, and be ready to start the school day. As our previous speaker just mentioned, it should not be too rigid. However, I am an advocate for rituals and routines. There should be a schedule for breaks, for lunch, rest. There should also be a set time for dinner. So you're going to try your best to mirror what the day was like pre-COVID. Establishing a schedule and a routine will create a mindset that will promote a willingness for our youngsters to engage in remote learning, and it will also help to create a positive environment in the home. Additionally, there's warmer weather outside, so please make sure your kids go out and play safely. It's great for them to enjoy the outdoors. Go for walks in the neighborhood and parks. Set up virtual play dates with friends and facilitate story time, games, scavenger hunt, or just let them chat. It's important for our kids to maintain those relationships with others that are outside of the home. Please make sure you promote and facilitate virtual connections with your children and their friends. That's so very important. One of the things that you can do to create a calm environment in your home is through mindfulness meditation. I'm a big advocate of this personally and professionally. Mindfulness meditation helps to decrease stress and anxiety. I implemented this initiative in my school 3 years ago to help mitigate some of the extreme behavioral challenges we were present with our students, and it was very successful. We've continued with providing mindfulness during remote learning. My teachers take turns recording mindfulness breathing techniques, and where our families have access through our remote learning platform. The parents love it, and most importantly, the students love it. This is a great strategy to use during the remote school day. Have your child take 2 3 to 5 minute breaks during the day and lead them through mindfulness breathing. It's a practice that I use in my home with my children. I have a middle schooler and a high schooler. The high schooler, he loves mindfulness. Many times I'll walk in his room and he's listening to YouTube and he's working on his breathing and his being in the moment. The more that you do it with your child, it will become a ritual and they will love it. You can simply YouTube mindfulness breathing, and there are various videos that will help you practice with your children. 3 resources that I would like to leave you with that you can use while you're at home, and they're very simple. Pinterest. Please go on Pinterest. You can find various project learning based activities, mindfulness activities, games, and various other things that you can do with your child. YouTube and Lexplore. Lexplore, you can like it on Facebook and you can Google the website. One of my teachers, who's a master teacher, she provides reading instruction to parents, teaching them how to teach their pre-K students and kindergarten students how to read. As we know, many of our students will face a very serious learning deficit due to remote learning, and that's unacceptable. We need all of our students to close that gap, and especially students in our urban communities. I am extremely concerned and I am worried about that. I can't even imagine going back to school in September and just seeing, thinking of all the progress that we made this year, knowing that we've been set back 6 months, and that's heartbreaking. So please utilize those resources. It's Lexplore, Lexplore, and it's a wonderful website. Thank you so much, Link Cecily.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. I am now pleased to introduce Dr. Wade Mahoney. Elizabeth Wade Mahoney, MD, is a practicing child and adolescent psychiatrist who has worked for many years advocating for quality health care for children and their families. Dr. Wade Mahoney graduated from the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in Bronx, New York, and completed her child and adolescent psychiatry fellowship at Columbia Presbyterian in New York City. As a part of her commitment to service, Dr. Wade Mahoney is a member of the Links Incorporated, where she previously served as chapter president, Eastern Area Health Initiative chair, and she currently serves on the National Mental Health Committee. Dr. Wade Mahoney developed lasting friendships and leadership skills growing up in Jack and Jill of America Incorporated. She maintains membership in the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and has been the lead psychiatrist in various programs catering to the needs of children and adolescents. She has worked abroad in Nigeria and Kenya, and she's been a featured speaker and panelist advocating for mental health intervention for our communities. Dr. Wade Mahoney.
Thank you, Link Cecily. Yes, being a 30-year member of the Links and growing up in Jack and Jill, where my mother served as president of the Westchester chapter, afforded me the opportunity to develop lasting friendships that certainly have been a strong source of support during these unprecedented times. For this reason, it's so exciting and good to see these two organizations come together because the long-term effects of unity are far-reaching, not only into our lives, but into the lives of our children. Yes, some of our children may be experiencing emotional distress during this pandemic, but many of them are actually thriving. The title of our workshop. The question becomes, why? Factors that contribute to thriving and emotional stability, especially during crisis time, include things such as having opportunities to be exposed to protective factors, some of which you've already heard, but are worth repeating. And that is having a sensitive and responsive caregiver, one that knows how to selectively tailor what is said and what children hear, and that what is said is developmentally appropriate. Having their basic needs readily met, such as food, shelter, clothing, medical and mental health needs. Having emotional support for both yourself and your children. And as was mentioned, with mindfulness, with prayers, not only as individuals, but as a family. And maintaining social connectedness while adhering to physical distancing. What can parents do to sustain this type of emotional stability? One thing, don't catastrophize everything. Children tend to mimic the responses of the parents. The more anxious you are, the more anxious they will be. Choose to focus on the good and tell stories of people helping others, people that are doing well during this time. Spend quality time together, like taking walks and gardening, working on art projects, playing games together, and learning something new. Let them teach you. Focus on self-care. Maybe take a nice long bath instead of a quick shower. Allow personal space. Your children may not always want to do exactly what you want to do exactly when you want to do it. Be flexible and gracious, and allow them some flexibility and allow them some control. That is, of course, within reason. And give opportunities for decision-making, as mentioned with meal preparation, or things like cleaning. Encourage them to have a buy-in to clean, let's say, the doorknobs and other things that in the household that others touch and that may be adversely impact another family member. Help them to get regular sleep and rest, eat healthy foods, and know that this pandemic does not define who they are and what they will be. This too shall pass. What things might we see if a child is experiencing distress? Things like sleep disturbance, lack of focus, irritability, loss of interest in some activities, anxiety, depression, or excessive fear, increased defiance, sibling fights, bad tempers, and in our teens, substance use. And you should seek professional help when you do see increased aggression that can't be appropriately managed, or regression and self-harming behaviors. So with these things, we hope that you will not only be able to help your children, which have many resources, but perhaps a neighbor's child or a child that you are mentoring who may not have the opportunities that we all have, being members of these two fine organizations. Remember, a viral pandemic mustn't necessarily be a mental health pandemic, and we can all help each other overcome these times. Thank you, Link Cicely.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wade Mahoney. And now I'd like to start with a question for Dr. McGlashan. So there's been a lot of excitement for tonight's webinar and lots of questions. And of course, we'll get to the question, how do I help my kid have structure when I feel like I'm losing my own mind? So we'll get to that. But now I wanted to kind of start off with a question that came up. And this question is, I heard my child talking with a friend yesterday, and I couldn't believe the language they were using. I noticed the more we're home together, I get a sense of who my kids are around their friends, and I'm not prepared. How should this person handle this?
Okay, that is a good question. I think probably most of us as parents have discovered that, there are different facets to our children. And as somebody who works in the schools, I can tell you, sometimes the version of the child that I know is different from the version of the child that the parent knows. But nonetheless, it is still your darling. And I think what we should do is look at this period as an opportunity to shape our child. I don't know how many times I thought to myself prior to this pandemic, oh my goodness, I'm running out of time with my son. I'm running out of time. 2 more years and he's going to college. And all of a sudden he's home. And guess what? We've been able to have dinner together as a family. We've been able to have more conversations. We've been able to dig a little bit deeper into how he sees things, and we've been able to share with him our values in a way that I don't think we were able to do before. So I wouldn't confront your child directly about, what you heard, so much as have a conversation. Have a conversation, an open conversation, and share with your child what what your life philosophy is, what your religious beliefs are. This is an opportunity to help shape your child in a way that, in our busy running back and forth lives, we weren't quite able to do the way we wanted to do.
Thank you. So Principal Davis, I have a question for you. You talked about the importance of structure. And so this question is about that tension between structure and some downtime. And so it reads, I'm torn between giving my child a break and having them do learning projects this summer. So what tips do you have for striking the balance between giving them that break they say they need and not wanting them to lose some of the gains that you talked about from the school year so far?
Well, learning is continuous. I'm a big advocate for that. You never stop learning. You must make it fun. So it's important that you give them a break while engaging in continuous learning. I'm an advocate for project-based learning activities, which is the act of learning through identifying real-world problems and developing its own solutions. So it's a journey, it's continuous. Children are challenged by using their reasoning skills. For instance, they can take over being a chef for a night or a week. What's the #1 skill that they're going to use while being a chef? Measurement equals math, okay? For the sake of time, please visit Pinterest. Again, it's a wonderful resource. Another thing that you can do, and some of the parents may not like this, but if you have nice small trees in your yard, you could, that are doable, you can have your child climb a tree while they're telling different parts of the story. They can paint rocks. You can talk about math, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for our youngsters. There are so many things, but again, learning is continuous. Please do not give them this idea that, okay, it's June 15th, you've had enough remote learning, now you're just going to play. Make it fun, make it engaging, and learning, again, is continuous.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Wade Mahoney, so the question that we have for you is perhaps kind of sensitive. So before the pandemic, my child was seeing a therapist and taking medication, and they were doing so well, we decided that we should stop. Both the therapy and also the medication had side effects. And so now it feels like they're feeling very stressed, and it's time And I think the parent says that it's time to return to video therapy and maybe even medication. But my kid says, no, I've had enough of that. How do I handle this? They seem like they're distressed, and at the same time, they are refusing the help that was useful to them before.
Yes, Link Cicely, and that is indeed a very challenging scenario, and especially with an adolescent, where you can see the increased defiance with the anxiety around the pandemic. And at that point, I would try to engage the child and talk to them about the reason that they don't want to participate in either therapy or in medication management anymore. Is it the clinician? Is it the medication? What is it about it that they find distressful? And then give your point of view in a gentle sort of way, of why you think it would be useful. And perhaps they would be willing to at least go along with it for the first or second session. And especially children in New York are used to seeing a psychiatrist or a psychologist face to face. They're not used to telepsychiatry, but I found in my practice working in telepsychiatry for several years that children adapt very easily, and they actually like it because they don't have the stigma of having to go to the doctor. No one is seeing them. They have privacy in their own home. And I would certainly make sure that they know in advance that this will be a private session, that brothers and sisters will not be interrupting, and that there will not be distracting noises and pets and so forth. Show them where they would be able to talk to the doctor. And if medication is in fact recommended, if they were having side effects, say that, this does not mean that you will be put back on the same medication. There are many, many options. So perhaps we will try something else if in fact it's necessary. It may not be necessary. Some of the symptoms that are being displayed may be the reaction to the overall environment of the pandemic. But in fact, if they do feel that their symptoms are starting to be very overwhelming, it would certainly be a good idea to encourage them to try a telemedicine session. And they can always not like it later, but at least try it one time.
So at least give it a chance.
Give it a chance. Give it a chance.
I have a question for the three of you before we go back into our presentations. And earlier we talked about mindfulness meditation, and many of us were shaking our heads yes. And I wonder though, how do we introduce mindfulness meditation both to ourselves or to our kids, where it seems like it's this thing and people talk about it, but how's sitting there feeling and experiencing myself going to help me? So how do you introduce it? How do you get somebody to try this thing that many of us have found to be helpful or believe could be useful?
Dr. Horsham-Brathwaite, what I would share is that here in New York, we have free access to the app for Headspace. They offered that due to the COVID pandemic. So that's a great way to kind of get started, is just download that app. And there are several really awesome mindfulness apps and meditation apps available that you can just try and listen and see how you feel. It's one of those things, I know for me, it really helps. It really helps. I've spoken to a lot of people who've told me that they actually had COVID-19. And one of the things I hear a lot is that when you have the illness, nighttime is really difficult. It's hard to breathe. It's hard to sleep. And many have shared that using these apps, sleep stories and and so forth help them to fall asleep. So I think utilizing the apps would be a great way to become introduced to mindfulness meditation.
And for my school, it's actually ingrained in our culture. We provided training to our staff. We've had parent workshops. It's a school-wide initiative. It's ingrained in the classroom, the phys ed class, music. My teachers use it to transition from one activity to the next to help calm behaviors. So it's very purposeful, and it's a common language. So once we got our parents on board, it was easy. The parents actually enjoy it. We had parents, a parent came to me and said, "Hey, my child is in the corner, 1, 2, 3, 4, and doing belly breaths. What is that?" And so we knew right then that we had to provide our parents with training. And so it's wonderful. I love it personally and professionally. I can tell you, I am a huge advocate. We have seen a decrease in some of our challenging behaviors, less anxiety, and the children are happier and the teachers are happier.
And I would have to agree. I've worked in the juvenile justice system with adolescent boys, and the environment, all of the clinicians, the line staff, everyone was taught the techniques. And when the young men eventually, with some resistance, but had a buy-in, and it became very useful with decreased numbers of negative engagements, such as fights and assaults on staff and so forth. And also in the environment where I work with the girls in the Safe Harbor program, which is human trafficking with adolescent females. And again, it was a sense giving us able to develop a sense of mastery, but it started with the line staff, all administrative staff, in addition to all the clinical staff, of course. And once everybody, and they did have parenting classes because a lot of the young ladies go home. And so it's having the whole environment and community that interacts with that child becoming involved.
Thank you. It sounds like mindfulness is not only worth trying, but also it's an opportunity to create a culture in your family, in your school, in your community around taking care of oneself in that way. Thank you so much. And now I'd like to move forward and introduce Dr. Linda Anderson. Dr. Linda D. Anderson is a clinical psychologist, professor, and therapist. Dr. Anderson currently teaches, consults, and empowers in a manner embraced by a diverse range of individuals and organizations. She is a professor at Hostos Community College, City University of New York, and a consulting psychologist at the Dalton School. Dr. Anderson earned her doctorate in clinical psychology at Columbia University. She has served as staff psychologist in the Department of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry at Beth Israel Medical Center, and has taught at Teachers College, Columbia University, and Bard College at Simon's Rock. She writes about topics that explore the psychology of success and cultural diversity, silent agreements at the workplace, challenges facing women, and work-life balance. She has appeared in popular media and television outlets. Most recently, she co-authored Silent Agreements, How to Free Your Relationships of Unspoken Expectations, currently available in bookstores and on Audible. Dr. Anderson.
It is a pleasure indeed, and we are all so challenged. I just want to remind us that a lot of this conversation we've had already is about a tale of two cities. And teaching, I am a psychologist. I call myself from the South Bronx to the Upper East Side. And therein lies all the extremes that we know and work in. So I would just say that when a community college is working well and understands its population right now in this COVID environment, what are we seeing? What's the tone? Well, it's to retain our students. that is first and foremost. When we lose our students with this population in particular, we may have lost them forever. The majority of our students are college students who are single mothers, single parents. And that is a whole nother reality where primarily the idea of making sure that basic needs are met and living, responding to the challenges of food, housing, job insecurity, health insecurity, that is the bottom line. That's primary. And so I'm very proud of our college who offers extensive assistance right now, everything from food pantries to career telecounseling, which they desperately need, to pastoral telecounseling. Many of our students are very religious and are very responsive to pastoral care within an academic setting. Telecounseling. And I also want to say that live call in center is what is going to make a student at least feel like there is another human being who cares. So I just want to remind us about that, in this world in which we live of infinity calls where we're not getting a response from a real person. And that's what they're looking for. So again, right now, we want our students to have access to computers. Many of them have spotty internet. If they have one working computer in the home, that is golden. Not all of them do. And remember, they have children who also need to use their computer to keep up with their schoolwork. So the level of stress, anxiety around resources is profound. And as long as we demonstrate through resource availability the compassion that they require, I think that we can keep more students in the system as opposed to their dropping out. And I want to contrast that reality with, the other reality of students in their early freshmen and sophomores returning home, sheltering in with parents, as well as graduate students. And my goodness, how this challenges our relational systems. I did, we talk about silent agreements in our book, which are the unspoken rules of relationships that grow from our assumptions, our expectations, our beliefs that we don't talk about, but we hold others responsible for them anyway. And of course, we have these unconscious clauses that we often attach to our relationships, no matter how well they're working or maybe when there are times of challenge. I would just say that to the extent that we are aware, and this idea of our silent agreements ourselves, that we all have, we are not always reflecting upon what we bring to the table, and the expectations that we do hold maybe our adult children do. Maybe we haven't had those conversations. So this is a time when I think the extraordinary value here is our changing relationships and how can we make this better. I'll just talk about doing teletherapy on FaceTime is brand new for me, but it's all about FaceTime now. And some of the very young adults, complain about being under the parental gaze again. Like that was the last thing that they expected to re-enter in the same way. Or, and being seen, what it feels like to be seen through the view of their parents' filter. And so for those who complain to me, and I absolutely say, look, I'm the one to complain to, because your parents are probably so stressed out they don't want to hear anything. And I said, I am a receiver, a collector of your complaints, and that is fine. And then we can move on and figure out how to find solutions. But I would just say that I'm seeing there's a hypersensitivity for many of them. Some of them are not necessarily coming to the dinner table or waking up on the time schedule that parents had expected or had conditioned or socialized them earlier. Everything has changed. And now who's in control? So we're seeing, the dance, which we would see anyway, right? We see it in the summers when our young people come home from college. But now it's prime time. So what do we, how do we address that? We're noticing that, but so what are we going to do about it? I would just say that when we notice our own silent agreements around perhaps efforts to exert, excessive control over our very young adults, we notice that doesn't work too well. And this idea of, of really getting to know them on very different terms, but also what they're bringing to the table. What are they making for dinner tonight? It may be much more interesting than we would expect or we would like or we would prefer. But, part of this is a rediscovery here, where we are really needing to move out of highly structured, rigid parental roles with our young adults, because times have changed and they have changed too. So questions like, really, how can we face this together? This is unbelievable. This is too much. What are we going to do? And I think that asking for their advice on many issues can be very helpful, because at the same time that we need to empower ourselves with a new sense of who we are, a new identity, right? The idea that, wow, life doesn't have to be always one that is focusing on being the person who knows everything, okay, and who brings everything to the table. What we begin to notice is, my goodness, look at the different bodies of knowledge that my son or daughter are learning that I had no idea. And who is he now? Who is she now? There's a lot of listening that's involved. I think that depending on who the talkers are in the family, as you can tell, I'm probably the talker in the family. So I got to give myself some pretty strict guidelines here around that listening rule. And I mean it. I have really got to say, 25 seconds here. I'm not saying anything. I want to hear what my son or daughter is saying without making a suggestion or a recommendation. Okay.
We would love to ask you more. And when we get to Q&A, I'm so sorry to jump in.
Oh, no problem.
Thank you so very much. So fascinating. Thank you, Dr. Anderson. And now I'm to introduce Dr. Kirkland Gordon. Dr. Sharon Kirkland Gordon, a licensed psychologist in New York and Maryland, currently serves on the staff at the University of Buffalo Counseling Service. Nearly a year ago in August, she retired as the director of the Counseling Center at the University of Maryland, College Park. She also served as an affiliate assistant professor in the Department of Counseling, Higher Education, and Special Education. Dr. Kirkland Gordon received her doctorate in counseling psychology from the State University of New York at Buffalo, and for the past 30 years, she has provided psychotherapy, career counseling, and crisis intervention services for many undergraduate and graduate students. She's also a trained mediator, and she received the Helen Rolke Award from the Association of Counseling Center Training Agencies, the organization's highest honor. She is a former member of the Board of Directors for the Family Crisis Center of Prince George's County. Dr. Kirkland Gordon.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this wonderful invitation from the Links and also Jack and Jill. I know that we want to move on with the program, and the way that I want to sort of frame this, I thank all the other panelists as well, because I can sort of relate totally to what everyone has said. I want to talk first and frame this. I'm going to talk a little bit about college students and the sort of picking up where Dr. Anderson left off as it relates to college students, and talking about those developmental kind of tasks that they have. The first one is autonomy related to independence. The second one is basically competence, learning about their strengths and weaknesses, learning about what they're good at. The identity, college shapes identity around racial identity, gender identity, career identity, student development. All of that is part of what's shaped through the college experience, as well as relationships, and their relationships not only with their peers, but also relationships with faculty and staff. Staff from the person who serves them their meals in the dining hall, all the way up to administrators. So those are some of the developmental tasks that really, when we talk about our students going through the academy, they have the curricular activities, but also co-curricular that helps to shape who they are as people. With the COVID, the onset of the COVID has really changed that. Now, I would not say necessarily that it has destroyed it, because it has not. I think in some ways, if we were to look at this in a glass half full kind of way, the autonomy and independence is sort of stretching some of our college students to think very differently about things, to access the resources that they have available to them. You can go to the next slide. So the impact, I'm going to use the impact of this COVID crisis on a lot of our students. I'm using some research from the Active Mind survey. This is a survey that was just done last month. And while it's not for specifically for students of color, they did survey about 3,300 high school and college students to get a sense of how the COVID pandemic was affecting those students. And as you can see, 80% of those students reported that the pandemic had a negative impact on their mental health. 20% of them said that their mental health had worsened as a result of the pandemic. And these are all things that I have seen in therapy. Since I'm in the therapy chair now, I get a chance to meet with students, and I was right there in the midst of this whole thing when it came down, and speaking with them, many of whom were in crisis and talking about their stress and anxiety. They were talking about the stress that they felt, the disappointment and the sadness. Some had family members who had COVID, and a few had members, unfortunately, who had passed away from COVID. So some are dealing with grief and loss, and these statistics kind of outline the impact of this pandemic on many of the students that I have seen. You can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the biggest impact, and this is for our commuters, as well as students who live on campus, and the students who basically have apartments off campus and go back and forth, and they are living independently. The one thing that I've heard that has been common among them all is the rapid change in terms of the instructional model. Right after spring break, they had to come back and they had to learn a whole new way of relating to their classmates, as well as taking in the academic information. These are students who were basically doing labs for biology, to students who were in, classes where they had more seminar-focused kinds of classes where the interaction among them was really critical to them. So they had to adjust to rapid change. The other is ambiguous losses. So many of them were dealing with things like rituals and traditions, like sororities and fraternities and things of that nature, joining clubs. and also study abroad opportunities that were interrupted, interviews and internships and things of that nature that were also interrupted, graduation ceremonies, which led to students kind of coming up with very creative ways of doing, of engaging in these rituals and traditions. They had to establish new ways of connecting. And many were worried about the health of family members and loved ones. At Buffalo, several of the students were not able to go home. Many of them went home, but some of them were lived in the epicenter of where the COVID crisis had erupted, and they could not go home because it was not safe for them to go home. So they were in settings in a residence hall just by themselves. Some of them were just a few people on a floor, a few people in a residence hall, and they were just there because they wanted to protect the health of their family members and felt it was just too dangerous and unsafe for them to go home. Some were worried about job security because some had lost their jobs on campus and did not have financial support for them. And there was a great deal of worry and confusion as they looked at the news over and over again about health disparities. And one of the things, as one of the other, my colleagues had said earlier, is that it's important to kind of limit the exposure to some of what's on the news because they take it in and not sure what to do with it. Next slide, please. So I know that Dr. Horsham Brathwaite asked me to talk a little bit about how do you support students who are going back home. And the first thing is, I think Dr. Anderson alluded to this, is be a good listener. Listen more than talking. Ask how the student is feeling, because this has been a major impact on them and turned their world upside down. The other thing, to mitigate any kinds of, even though there will be some kind of tension, usually there is when you have a lot of adults living in one place, and these are emerging adults, that you discuss the expectations and house rules up front. Have conversations as a family. And I love the idea of having the family gather for at least once a week and sort of talking about, how are things going, and just have a set time where you just talk about some of the things that everybody is struggling with. Clearly state your non-negotiables. If you don't want smoking in your house, you need to state that you don't want smoking in your house. And make sure that is clearly stated. And that helps to alleviate a lot of unnecessary tension and crises and eruptions. Meet them where they are and acknowledge that everyone is dealing with uncertainty and unpredictability, and normalize those reactions on the part of the parents or caretakers as well as the student. Everybody is dealing with the same things. And again, they may have some great ideas. A lot of times students do. And all is not lost. There's a lot of learning that can come from this. Acknowledge how difficult it is for your student. Lead with empathy, lead with compassion, lead with caring, lead with flexibility. And one of the things that I've encountered with some of my students, some of my clients, has been issues around privacy and space, and personal boundaries when they return back home. If at all possible, provide a private space. These are emerging adults, and so it's important to have a space where they can do their work, and also they can just have privacy so they can kind of decompress. And I know caretakers and parents need the same kind of space, but respect their need for privacy and personal boundaries. And ensure your student is taking care of their basic needs, such as eating and sleeping and exercise. Get outside, because sometimes they can sleep all day and get up in the middle of the night and their schedule is off and their motivation is down. So we want to help them to sort of get back on, get into a routine, not too rigid of a routine. Of course, this is with their having a conversation with them about this, but attending to basic needs is really important. Next slide, please. The other is expect life is as life is. Expect that things are not going to be perfect. There will be good days and bad days, conflicts and agreements. That's all a part of it. And the role of the parent or the caregiver or caretaker is to serve as a consultant. Connect with your student to connect them with resources if they need it. Most counseling centers on university campuses There's a counseling center on most campuses. Those counseling centers are currently providing either phone or tele-video sessions for clients, for their students. And these services are usually free. And if a student needs it, I would encourage you to connect them to those resources, as well as academic and tutorial and financial. The university is still going on. It's a different modality in terms of the ways that they are reaching out and connecting, but it's still happening. And then practice self-care and gratitude for yourself, and compassion and kindness. Do things to have a time out for yourself, because it is very, very difficult. The impact of all of this is enormous, and we cannot forget to take care of ourselves. And then find new ways and new opportunities to deal with this in-between time. I see this as an in-between time. It's not going to last forever, but in the meantime, see what we can create, see what you can create as a family, look at opportunities, different things that you've not done before, think of possibilities, be creative, try something new, and engage your young adult in that process of, teaching you different kinds of things, teaching you how to TikTok, teaching you all kinds of stuff that they kind of have thoughts about all kinds of things. And I know that you have to probably go to the Q&A, so I'll stop right there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kirkland Gordon. And so now we'll go to our Q&A. So to our participants, if you would like to ask a question, you can put the question in the chat area. And we did receive some questions already, and so I will start with those and address them to all of the panelists. The first question, Dr. Kirkland Gordon, you talked about loss and grieving. And it seems that the loss is not just for the child, the young person, but the hopes and the dreams that we had for our kids. They may have just graduated out of Jack and Jill, and so the expectations and plans for the party, or the lack of knowing what the fall will look like, or going on college tours with our kids. So I start with you, Dr. Kirkland Gordon, and open it to all. What do we do? Because we're grieving and they're grieving.
Yes. That's a really good question. It's so challenging. This is a place that we've never been in, this place of having this ambiguous loss around the hopes and dreams. But I think that it also is an invitation to think about different ways of doing things. That it's not that you acknowledge the loss, you acknowledge how hard it is, and at the same time, think of other ways that you can honor and acknowledge and celebrate some of those milestones. So things like graduation and all the other kinds of rituals and various kinds of activities that one sort of graduated from one place to another. Not being able to do things face to face is a total reality. But thinking people have come up with some really amazing ways to celebrate by having parades up the street, or different ways to kind of honor and mark the occasion, with perhaps putting it on ice, like the major celebration in person will be another time. But at this age of physical distancing and social distancing, you're not able to have everyone over. There may be a way that you can do some of these things online.
I would just say invitations to daydream. I find that because we are so tense around how do we handle this, maybe opening up a conversation around, what are we going to do when this is over? Have some visions, paint it, make tentative plans. How do we visualize this? Just to kind of a way of relaxing together and seeing that, there will be a time soon when we can do this. It's not over.
So the next question that came in is, in fact, as soon as this webinar was announced, this question came to us, and it is, again, how does a parent balance working and keeping their job or business with homeschooling, with creating structure? How we've been told you can't do it all at one time. So how do you do it? What tips do you have?
Well, Dr. Horsham-Brathwaite, if I may, I think that you can't do it, first of all, perfectly. You can't be in two places at one time, but you can be flexible with yourself. You know, we talked about being kind to yourself. Whatever vision you have of being the teacher that your child has during the day, why don't we put that aside, because that's probably not realistic. But perhaps just having a schedule where you take breaks. If you, depending on the kind of work that you do, maybe reworking your schedule so that things that don't require actual interface with a client, for example, things that can be done in the evening, maybe you save to the evening when the children are asleep if you have little ones. So maybe kind of rethinking your schedule is one way to start. But again, don't be too hard on yourself. I think it's important to just do your best and take it one day at a time. And again, don't forget to reach out to your school, to your child's school, for ideas and suggestions. And if it is just it seems impossible, let your child's teacher know, let your child's school counselor know. They're still on the job and they're struggling too. Many of them are parents too, and you know, they're doing their best, but they're happy to hear from you and to offer maybe ideas that they've heard from other parents. So remember, you're not in this alone. Your village is still there. Reach out to your village for support and ideas.
Ms. Davis, were you going to say something? I wanted to make sure you had the chance.
Yes, thank you. Having a schedule is critical, and it also depends on the age of the child. For those with middle school children, high school children, you know, they can conduct their remote learning without oversight. But for those with youngsters, it's extremely challenging, especially depending on what you do professionally. So you may have to tend to your work after hours. And that's the reality. I know many parents may not want to hear it, but if you're home with a kindergartner, a first and second grader, they need you right there with them. They need you to assist them with logging in a computer, getting into their Zoom and their Google Meet. Do not hesitate to reach out to your teachers and also set up virtual play dates. There are virtual tutors, and that can be a great resource. Just imagine having maybe once a day your child hooked up with other children and they have story time. That'll give you 40 minutes to accomplish some tasks. So do not be afraid to reach out to your network, other parents, the teachers. My teachers host virtual Zoom pajama parties, story time. So this, you know, some of the parents are present, but this also allows the parents the opportunity to tend to things that they need to do without their child. But it's challenging. So please just reach out to the school. They will provide you with resources and they will give you help. And I cannot stress this along. Reach out. My parents, they do not hesitate to call me and email me. So I implore you to do the same with your school administrator.
Thank you. We have time for just a question or two. And so this question is, you know, not only are parents home with their kids at various ages, but kids are home with one another. And so what suggestions or tips do you have in terms of how to empower siblings to resolve their own conflict? And how do you know when you step in or let them handle it themselves?
If I can say, I think, again, it depends on how old they are, you know, and it depends on how intense those conflicts are. You know, if it's where somebody might get hurt, then I would say you really need to, you know, step in right away. But if it's more of like a disagreement and the children are old enough to kind of work it out, sometimes you have to let them talk it out, and learn those kind of problem solving skills. Of course, that being said, it's not easy if you are on a Zoom call for work and they're going at it. But again, just reminding yourself that the kids are also going through a difficult period. Maybe remind them, hey guys, I know you're stressed out. Let's all take a breath. To Ms. Davis's point, using mindfulness, that would be a great time to say, you know what, let's sit down, let's catch our breath and see if we can talk through this. So you know, so it's not easy even when there's not a pandemic. You know, some siblings argue well into their 40s.
No.
Thankfully, they don't have to live together.
Thank you so much. And the last question that I have is, you know, during this time, it really is great that we have the internet, social media to be able to engage across homes and communities, but it also can create spaces where our young people either are vulnerable to internet addiction or bullying over social media channels. How can we help them to manage such things?
Well, it seems important to keep the lines of communication open. You know, one of the things that this pandemic does is it keeps people in close quarters with each other. And it may be that household members, family members, the students have more access, greater access to the parents or to the caregivers. And so keeping those lines of communication open, talking about the various ways to use the internet, talking about basically what, if there are any limits. Sometimes it's important to talk about what the limits are in terms of how it will be used, and basically what websites are okay and what websites are not. And also, if X happens, then let me know about it. I think that those are some of the things that maybe some of the approaches that may be used is being very, very clear about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, so that the child or the young person can basically let their parent know. But I think that communication is really key, as well as limit setting.
I would say that the wellnesssociety.org actually has a COVID-19 anxiety workbook that is free. Download it, print it out. But it is the sort of, I think it's the most extensive list of resources across age that I've seen so far.
Wonderful, thank you. And to that point, I'd like to share with our audience some resources that can be found online that give specific information for how to support children and young people. And so we have a slide coming up in just a moment, so you'll be able to see that. As we're waiting for the slide to come up, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of our presenters for their wonderful words this evening, to Dr. McGlashan for sharing with us the usefulness of having a family meeting, to Ms. Davis for sharing with us the opportunity to use mindfulness both for ourselves and for our communities and for our children, to Dr. Wade Mahoney for reminding us that our children may be more resilient than we imagine, to Dr. Anderson for reminding us that the patterns and relational agreements that we have in our families don't have to be the same agreements that we have moving forward, and to Dr. Kirkland Gordon for reminding us that we have an opportunity to slow down and to ask questions and to be a consultant, particularly for our emerging adults, rather than going back to parenting that worked when they were younger. So I thank you all. I thank you to Dr. Tucker Sims, to Ms. Alexis Hayes, Esquire, for their leadership. Thank you to Ms. Rhonda Crowder, our program chair, for her leadership and support, and to the Eastern Area Health and Human Services chair and co-chair, and to all of you for being here today. We'll just wait one more moment for the resources to come up, and then if not, we'll send them out to you via email. But on that list is the Child Mind Institute. Here we go. The Center for Complicated Grief, because we do know that grief and loss is occurring during this time. The American Academy for Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. The Steve Fund, which provides information and resources for primarily college students, but some information applicable to high school students. I'll also bring to your attention that the National Association of Black Social Workers has a great resource of community resources specifically for the needs of Black people in the United States, and of course, SAMHSA and the American Psychological Association. So I welcome you to take a picture of that slide, but you can also feel free to reach out at ealinksmentalhealth@gmail.com, ealinksmentalhealth@gmail.com for any resources. And we thank you all for your time together this evening. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.